In this clip of the Functional Sportsaholic, we talk about Hard Knocks. If you can, subscribe to our podcast in the show notes below. We're also, we would also love your subscription to the YouTube channel Underdog TV. Like us, comment, we'll be interactive. Let's see. Speaking of, I guess, Hard Knocks, relating back to that. And by the way, Bovada has Oakland at 66-1 to win the Super Bowl. So I actually think those odds are a little bit better. I haven't been tracking the movement, but I think they're actually a little bit better than they started in the offseason, but they could certainly be better. But yeah, Hard Knocks episode 5 now was just up there. And this was the episode where we saw the last preseason game. We start to see the cuts and all that stuff. And
this is the finale, right? This was the last one, right?
That was the finale. Did you get a chance to watch it, Sam? I know.
Yeah, man. I dove into it on Reddit and saw it. So, yeah, man. It was kind of disappointed in the season, to be honest with you.
Well, I think it was so hyped up, and we were. I mean, I think, if you look at the franchise of the shows in general, I think it was still probably in the top half, maybe the top quarter. I think the worst season for me, I think the Cowboys did it twice, and there was one year that the Kansas City Chiefs with Herm Edwards, I believe, did it, and those to me were by far the three worst seasons. It was, if the Cowboys didn't do it twice, or if they did, it was the Wade Phillips season. I hated that season. Yeah. It was awful. But I do think the Cowboys did it twice. And the Ravens, I think, did it one year. I don't think that was particularly good. But either way,
the Browns was so good last year.
It was so good.
I feel like this was, and we were hyped up to see, all this mess. And there's been drama, but it hasn't been as, I don't know. They haven't showed as much of the Antonio Brown stuff, because a lot of it's happened away from the camera, I think. So,
and I know we'll get into a little bit more of that later.
Yeah,
it's almost like, so Sam, you and I, we both like Lord of the Rings. It came out, I think, in our late teen years, and we watched it. Mm-hmm. It was really cool. And then The Hobbit came out like a decade later. I'm just like, It's kind of like that. It wasn't bad. Maybe if it was the first thing that we saw, we would like it, but it was the second thing, so we were just kind of hot and cold on it. Well, I just don't think it met the hype. But a couple notes here. I thought it was funny that John Gruden was carpooling to work and complaining about the price of gas when he's making $10 million a year as a head coach. I guess he's still frugal, John Gruden, but I thought that was funny. By the way, Frank Caliendo, we talked about this last week. I saw he popped up on the Herd doing John Gruden impressions. So that guy,
of course, man, this guy's loving as soon as John Gruden got hired with the Raiders, he was like, yes, yeah, I'm at least going to get a few more years out of this crap.
I know. Yeah. I know, he's so happy. I think he had a similar run when Gruden got hired from Monday Night Football. So every time Gruden or Madden do something, he gets like a little uptick in his career and makes a little more cash.
Yeah, or Morgan Freeman. He can do a good Morgan Freeman too. So
yeah, but it's weird to see a fat white guy doing that impersonation.
Exactly. It has to be a voiceover type deal.
Yeah. What else? Speaking of Antonio Brown, and we'll get into some more stuff later. But I noticed in the last two episodes, I'm sure you did too, that the Antonio Brown stuff after he came back with the helmet, it's all been like, how great is Antonio Brown? So in episode 4, they were showing him go to the high school game and sign autographs. They showed him with like 4 fan letters, and he was reading them out loud. This week, you see him playing around with his kids, getting some treatment, and being a good dad and all this stuff. That, to me, was just like, I think that's kind of why the season went a little bit sideways. Is it was pretty clear to me that I think Oakland was probably in the ears of Hard Knocks.
Right.
One of the big questions coming in was like, oh, how are they going to handle this Antonio Brown helmet situation? And they did touch on it, but they didn't really touch on it too long. They just showed Antonio Brown explaining his side of it and John Gruden supporting him. I think this is a little powder puff. I get it. I'm not too upset about it because they do have to cooperate with all these NFL teams to keep the show going. So I'm not going to harp on them too bad for that. But, man, they were really soft on Antonio Brown these last 2 episodes. I think that maybe the whole season, but really soft these last 2 episodes. But
yeah, considering, Mike Mayock came out and was like, listen, this guy needs to get on or get off. And the whole thing happened yesterday when Antonio Brown put his fine letters up on Instagram. And it's like, my own team's trying to hate on me. It's like, dude, you got fined for not being at practice. Like, you didn't know that was going to happen? And then him and Mayock got into it, I guess, yesterday afternoon on Wednesday. We're recording this on a Thursday. and they the word is that they're going to suspend him. Like, this guy hasn't even played in a regular season game yet. He's going to get suspended.
We called this when the trade happened.
The guy, I don't know what's wrong with him.
I know, man. It's pride. It really is. It's pride.
Yeah, I guess so. But, like, you can't even go to a year without causing problems at a place. You can't even go to the first game.
You can't even go. You can't even go.
Crazy, man. Like,
you can't even go to a cryo chamber and put socks on.
Right.
You know, you can't even get that right.
The guys, when I see stuff like this, I'm like, man, this guy's going to really struggle when football is not around anymore.
Yeah.
When the checks aren't coming anymore and the attention isn't there anymore. I'm like, this guy is really, really, really going to struggle in life because he can't go, it's just like things don't apply to him.
Yeah.
And
you're right.
I mean, who are you, man? Like, everybody's replaceable. You think they're going to be talking about Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh, in 10 years? Yeah, no, right. They're going to be talking about the next guy, man.
Smith-Schuster.
Like,
James Washington. Anybody,
that's what I'm
right?
saying. Like, anybody in the world is replaceable. They gave Michael Jordan's locker up, like in Chicago. Stuff happens, man.
Yeah.
Like, but you see stuff like this, and this guy's he's just never going to get it in life. I really don't think so.
Yeah, I know. We've been saying that all year. We've been kind of tough on him, and completely different backgrounds here. But I actually see a lot of parallels in terms of the mentality with like Johnny Manziel. Johnny Manziel. It's there's some kind of like, I think it's maybe a little bit different. Maybe the sources of the actions are a little bit different, right? Because Johnny Manziel was so entitled growing up. But again, you still come off with that same, like Johnny Manziel when, he was drafted and all that stuff. He always kind of felt like, the rules didn't necessarily apply, or like he would just, his talent would carry him through. Now, Antonio Brown is obviously vastly superior. In fact, I will, because we've been so critical of Antonio Brown all year, I will say, dude, like when they showed him on tape, I mean, he looked so good when he plays. If he can just play football, I mean, there's no question. And he's going to be a Hall of Famer, all that stuff. But I think what's really sad is like, I think about this, with Calvin Johnson too, with the Detroit, and maybe Larry Fitzgerald. I think these are all sad because, Jerry Rice is basically the top of the mountain. And Emmitt Smith for running backs, Jerry Rice for wide receivers, right? In terms of the record, the yardage, the catches. We're going to see somebody break the catches record just because the NFL has changed. Somebody's going to do it.
Right.
If Marvin Harrison aligned his career better in terms of the years played with Peyton Manning, he would have done it. Larry Fitzgerald,
right.
If he had a quarterback, which makes me sad, if he had a good quarterback his entire career, like if he had Carson Palmer, that matchup for his entire career, he would have broken the record. Antonio Brown, if he had just stayed with Ben Roethlisberger for a while longer, he could have threatened the record. Like all this stuff, like Terrell Owens, if he could have just played football, he could have broken the record. I mean, these guys are like extraordinary. I just feel like, and it's always wide receiver for some reason. Calvin Ridley and Larry Fitzgerald aside.
And you start to and I love Randy Moss. And, he was had some issues earlier in his career, but eventually you could see that he got it.
You're right.
And he finally was like, you know what, like all that other stuff is whatever. And you see him go to the Patriots. It's not a problem. It's not an issue. Whatever. He cements himself in the Hall of Fame and parlayed that into a nice broadcasting career and all that stuff where he's actually really good on TV.
The book on Moss has always been that he's super, super intelligent, but he just had some personality issues. I actually think in terms of, I guess, mentality and the way, because people are critical of Moss, when I think it was a playoff game or a deep season game, he did that like moon the crowd thing in Green Bay, the straight cash homie with the fines and all. He caught some negative publicity, but I never really thought he was as bad as say Odell Beckham is, like in terms of going out and putting his name out in the press. I think he was just kind of lashing out at some stuff. But I see Randy Moss similar to how I view maybe Aaron Rodgers and Josh Rosen, two quarterbacks, but. These guys, and Randy Moss, I think, falls into this category, is I think they're so intelligent from a football point of view that they get frustrated when things aren't being done up to their standards from like a schematics point of view. We're seeing a little bit of like, jostling for power, I think, with LaFleur and Aaron Rodgers. And what you're getting, I think, with Josh Rosen is, first of all, Arizona last year was a dumpster fire. Incredibly so. But I think Miami is actually doing right by him by keeping him on the bench. I'm glad that they did that. They're trading some pieces away and trying to build for the future. I think that's the right thing for Miami to do. But Rosen, I think, will fall in line if he gets a really good offensive coordinator that he feels is on his level intelligently. And that's what that's what his draft book said about him. Is he's great. He's an NFL talent, but he wants to know and really understand and respect, I think, is the key word. Respect the offensive mind behind it. Randy Moss, when he went to the Patriots, no problem whatsoever because he had Bill Belichick, he had Josh McDaniel. I mean, he had great coaches that were challenging him. I think that's what Aaron Rodgers needs. I think that's what Josh Rosen needs. But Antonio Brown's different, man. It's just a different kind of thing there.
Crazy.
What else do I have in my notes here? The Keelan Doss got cut. He had a couple of drops. That just tells you. That's why I say two things. I say that preseason, everybody says that we don't need 4 preseason games. I agree, and I also disagree. One, I think it's ridiculous that the NFL teams make season ticket holders. Me as an ex-season ticket holder myself, I think it's ridiculous that they force season ticket holders to pay full price for a preseason game. It's garbage. It's garbage football, okay? It should be more family. They should have more family nights like minor league baseball for these things. But second, we've seen this year the starters, teams are starting to rest their starters more. These games are crucial to determine who's going to make the backside of the roster. They need, coaches need to see players in live activity. It can't be practice. It can't be scrimmages. It has to be live activity under the lights with the crowd around them. You have to see that. And we see in preseason week 4, Keelan Doss, Hard Knocks was kind of pumping him up in week 4. We see him 2 drops in week 5. Boom, cut. And it's just crazy that 1 or 2 drops of a pass, literally, I don't know if this will be the case with Keelan Doss, probably not, but it can literally end your career. Can you imagine? You're a basketball player, right? You played a little bit in college. Can you imagine, like in training camp, like before the season starts, you miss one jumper, and then your career's over?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, there was a story about again, I'm an ex-Redskins fanatic. There was a story about this receiver that was in camp with the Washington Redskins during the first Joe Gibbs era, so when they were very good. And there was a guy that was on the bubble, and it was the 4th quarter of, I think, the last preseason game. He ran a perfect route, wide open, was going to be a deep pass for a touchdown, and the quarterback overthrew him by like 4 yards, this 4th-string quarterback. And, next day he gets cut. And the guy said, what are you talking about? I was wide open on this play. I'm separating myself. And Joe Gibbs said, you didn't catch the ball. And basically the insinuation was, well, the quarterback didn't put you in the position, and that's just the way it goes sometimes. You have such a razor thin, thing. And this guy like held it against Joe Gibbs for, this was, by the time I read this article a while ago, this is like 20 years, 30 years after the fact. And I get it because your dream's crushed at that point. Right, but he's holding it against Joe Gibbs. But the reality is 53 men for an NFL team that has 22 starters, and you got to find backups at each position, right? So you're looking at a minimum of 22 and 22. So that's 44. So you have 9 roster plus punter, plus long snapper, plus kicker. That's 47. You have 6 spots.
Right.
6 spots are up for grabs a lot of times in camp, man. It's razor thin, man. It's hard. It's hard to make an NFL team. Even though there are a lot of teams, it's the biggest roster in professional sports. It's still hard, man.
Still hard.
All right, I think that's enough of the Hard Knocks. You got anything else to talk about there, Hard Knocks wise?
No. And it'll be interesting to see who they do next year and what that looks like. Well,
as the rules typically go, right? They can make it's nobody that has a new head coach and nobody that's made the playoffs in the last 2 years. They're automatically exempt. So my guess is, I don't think it, like everybody else, the odds-on favorite right now, I forgot what Bovada has them at, but the odds-on favorite for the first head coach to either resign or get fired is Jay Gruden with the Redskins. Not going to happen. Not going to happen. He'll make it through the season. I think he's not going to be the first. I don't know who will be. I don't have a pick. Maybe I'll add that to a segment next week or something, but it's not going to be him. The Redskins are always better than people think, and they have Haskins now. Alex Smith is out for the year. The Case Keenum's starting, and this team I think is still going to win like 6 or 7 games, just because they always do. I know that they have no business doing that, but they just always do. So I think he's going to keep his job because of that. But But anyway, what was I talking about there? The lead into that. I lost myself.
Who are they gonna feature next year?
Oh, right. So the Redskins are going to be a candidate because I do not think they'll have a head coach. I don't think Buffalo is going to make the playoffs, so I think they'll be a candidate. Miami, basically everybody who hired a head coach this season is probably going to be a candidate next year because not a lot of teams are going to fire, and a lot of those teams aren't going to make the playoffs. So there's going to be some interesting teams. My guess is it's going to be Washington because they were one of the finalists this year, and I don't think they can avoid it. Buffalo would be an interesting one. Just because I like what they're building. I think that would be a fun one, but Buffalo is also not a big city draw, whereas Washington is. Chicago made the playoffs last year, so even if they missed the playoffs, they wouldn't be there. Minnesota would be an interesting one if they missed the playoffs this year. Yeah, man, it's gonna be an interesting one. Green Bay next year would be interesting, even though they're small market.
Yeah.
I'm wondering. The Giants would be interesting. Big market, right?
Yeah, big market.
There you go. So
they're going to have some turnover and such. So they're rebuilding.
Yep.
So.
The Manning versus Daniel Jones storyline. It'll be interesting.
We're going to get into some aliens, man.
Actually, we will be getting into some aliens in the next clip if you want to keep an eye out there. We're talking about just alien activity. It's not sports related. But this channel, if you could subscribe on Underdog TV, like, comment, we'd appreciate it. Also, subscribe to our full-length podcast on Apple iTunes. Thank you very much.